to try and share my screen. There's that awkward silence that I'm sure we're all familiar with from lessons. Hopefully you are now seeing on your screen something which says TSH Berkshire. Janet, can you just confirm that that's working?
Yes, it is. Lovely. Yeah, we can see it.
Thank you very much. Right, so as I said, that's who we are, and at the moment we are the core team for the Teacher School Hub for Berkshire. We do have a sort of a brand identity which we're slowly building for the hub, and as I said, it is known as TSH Berkshire, and in due course you will receive details of a website which will be a fairly simple tshberkshire.org, and also a Twitter account with the handle at TSH Berkshire. So we'll give you those contact details again a bit later on. So the agenda for this afternoon, we're going to say a little bit more about our background in a moment as a school, not very much, but talk mainly about the Teaching School Hub programme and the remit for that. We're very conscious that the launch of Teaching School Hubs has, shall we say, been fairly muted, I think, nationally. We understand that there is going to be a ministerial letter coming out next week to all schools, which actually will give you a lot more detail. But hopefully, when you receive that letter, it will make a lot more sense having been to the session this afternoon. We're going to tell you a little bit about our operational model, so what we can offer and how we're going to offer it across the area. And then we're going to talk through the different strands of activity, the early career framework and the appropriate body, the National Professional Qualifications Suite, initial teacher training and other CPD. And those are the sort of 4 core strands of activity for the Teaching School Hubs. I should say, I'll give you a warning that we're going to spend much more time talking about ECF than about the other sections. And that is because that's the one that's furthest advanced in terms of activity, and also the one that I guess you may be most anxious about at the moment because of the lack of information that's come through from the centre. There's an opportunity for you to ask questions, and if I just put the sort of usual housekeeping notice up, please stay on mute if you can. If possible, make sure your name is on the screen so that we can see you by name rather than head teacher at or whatever. I've already said the presentation will be recorded. As is common in these presentations, please use the chat facility for questions, and then Janet and I will try and deal with those either verbally or by a chat response as we go through. We're going to pause after each section and kind of deal with any significant questions, or we'll save the really important ones for the ends of each section as we go through. So any questions, please pop into the chat and we'll try and answer them to the best of our ability. So just a quick word about Langley Grammar School. As I said, Teaching School Hubs, the designation is given to a single school, and there are no sort of multiple applications and designations as there were under the old programme. So Langley Grammar School, just in case you're not familiar with us or aware of us, we were a national teaching school designated in 2013. And we're one of the lead schools in the Slough Teaching School Alliance, along with Upton Court Grammar School. We've also acted as the appropriate body for newly qualified teachers in Slough for the last 5 years. And we're also designated as a computing hub. And we have an Apple iPad program in school, and we're an Apple Distinguished School for the work that we do there. We've got experience of delivering MPQ-ML and MPQ-SL programs as a school, and we have been designated as the Teaching School Hub for Berkshire from September 2021. Now, the Teaching School Hub programme, as I said, has been launched in a relatively low-key way. So just a few words about the programme and then the remit of the new Teaching School Hubs. So the current teaching school programme, which has something like 800 or more designated teaching schools across the country, ends this summer. And the new programme establishes instead 87 teaching school hubs, organised loosely on local authority boundaries. And the focus for the teaching school hubs is on teacher training and development, and recognising that teacher and leadership development is fundamental to school improvement. It's interesting to note what teaching school hubs are not doing, and the school-to-school support, school improvement remit that was in the old teaching school programme is not part of the new teaching school hub programme. This is very much focused on delivery of teacher training and teacher development through recognised CPD programmes. Hubs are expected to build strong partnerships across their area with other schools to support teachers and leaders at every stage of their career and to cover every phase and type of school in the hub areas. Now, the teaching school hub designated area in Berkshire is a large one. I'm not sure we realised quite when we applied for this that it is actually, I think, the biggest teaching school hub area in the country with 347 schools. And it is also a very complex area with 6 different local authorities. And that adds an interesting layer of complexity to the operational model compared to some of the other areas in the country. We are, of course, over in Slough, and we're on the eastern side of Slough. So Berkshire is very long and thin, and we're at one end of it. So I'm not sure that hub is necessarily the correct term to be using. And that geography actually influences our operational model, which we'll talk through with you a little bit later. Going back to the teaching school hub remit, there are a number of areas of activity that the Department for Education expects teaching school hubs to undertake. In no particular order, they are the promotion and delivery of initial teacher training, the delivery of the early career framework, appropriate body services for early career teachers, and we're all getting used to the new acronyms that are going to be used here. So NQTs go and are replaced by ECTs, early career teachers. The delivery of the National Professional Qualification Framework, and I'll say a little bit more about that later on because the qualifications themselves have been revised and there are new ones available. Teaching school hubs are expected to promote, organise and signpost to other forms of continuous professional development, including DFE-funded sources of support. For example, the curriculum hubs, such as the maths hubs, research schools, and any other DFE-funded programmes. So that's the remit. And as we go through this presentation, you'll see that we've included a number of slides that have a different style to them. And these are labelled as DFE slides. These are slides which have been given to us by DFE to share with you. They tend to be quite crammed, quite detailed, and therefore we're not really going to go through these, but in the slide deck or the recording, you can look at these in more detail, but they basically are giving you just a little bit of expanded detail on the things that we're saying. So this one shows you the teaching school hub remit as a kind of journey through from a trainee teacher to an early career teacher to an experienced teacher and middle leader through to a senior leader, head teacher, and then for many people, executive leadership. And at each stage, there is an element of support which is provided. And the idea is that there is a kind of continuous thread that runs through those different stages. There are strands of professional development which are common to the initial teacher training stage right through to senior leadership. And the DFE refer to that as their golden thread, and you'll see that that term coming up in one or two other slides. Given the remit and given the complexity of the area that, as a teaching school hub, we're expected to serve, the operational model that we are going to adopt is very much a distributed model. As I said, hub isn't quite the right term for it. It's much more of a network which we are going to try and coordinate. And it's aligned to the complex and diversified nature of the hub area. We recognise that across the whole county, across the 6 different local authorities, there is an enormous amount of local knowledge and some extremely strong local collaborations. Some of those based upon schools that are teaching schools in the current teaching school programme, but there are other collaborations as well, which perhaps predate the teaching school programme or have been formed alongside it. And these are very, very strong areas of collaboration that we wish to encourage and support. So the model that we will be using will recognise the existing success, we'll try and utilise the existing experience and expertise that's already out there in the different areas, and build on those existing structures across the area. And that does require a willingness on the part of existing teaching school groupings, ITT partnerships and others to contribute to delivery. And I know that my colleague Janet has been in discussion with a number of different groups across the area, different colleagues, some of whom are on this call this afternoon, about what that's actually going to look like in practice. So essentially, we are going to develop a sort of localized cluster model for each of the programs that are rolled out, centered on, where possible, some existing collaboration or partnership, and supported and led by people who are already doing these roles in those areas. So the approach is attempting to recognise the diverse nature of Berkshire, the very practical challenges that we've got of maintaining effective relationships with 6 very different local authority areas. I think we're quite conscious that we're possibly the only organisation that will be effectively pan-Berkshire, working across the whole Berkshire area. So we have a very strong feeling that our role is to coordinate and signpost and point people to all the existing sources of local knowledge and ability to build up effective networks and partnerships. So I hope that gives you as an indication of how this is going to work. We'll say a little bit more about that in the context of the individual programs. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Janet, who's going to talk to you about the first of those areas of activity, which is the early career framework. Just in terms of managing your expectations, we're expecting that this session in total will run for no more than an hour, and we're aiming to finish at around about 4:30 to allow time for further questions. Apologies in advance if we overrun very slightly. And the bulk of the time over that half hour will be given over to the ECF, because as I said earlier, that's the area that is furthest advanced at the moment in terms of the planning. So Janet, I'll hand over to you, and if you can do a Chris Whitty, please, every time you want the slides changed.
Yeah. Next slide, please, John. Thank you. So yes, this is one of the DFE slides about the ECF, and just showing you, reminding you the position of the ECF in the DFE's golden thread, as they keep referring to. Now, some of you may know more about the ECF, depending how far you've got in your own kind of research about what the changes to induction coming in September, depending on your role in school. Some of you may not know very much about it at the moment. I think we should say there is quite a lot of information to take in regarding the early career framework. And so what we're hoping to do over the next kind of 15-20 minutes or so is kind of give you an overview and maybe a reminder of some of those things. But we are planning to do another session specifically focusing on the ECF, just focusing on the ECF in the near future, when we can go into it in a little bit more detail, talk about the programme that we're going to offer as TSH Berkshire. And so today is intended to be an overview, really, rather than going into great detail about the programme that we'll be offering from September. So if we can have the next slide, please. So just a reminder about the principles of the ECF, and I think probably most people are aware of the big picture of it, that it's a 2-year induction programme. It is intended as support, not assessment, and as an entitlement. So it really is intended as a programme, a 2-year programme of professional development to support new teachers at the start of their career, and kind of being part of this thread from ITT through the first 2 years of teaching and on into the MPQs. And it came out of the DFE's consultation about strengthening teacher recruitment and retention, and some of the research they found where, I think we're all familiar with this, that 20% of teachers leave within the first 2 years, they found in their research, and 33% in the first 5 years. So it's designed to offer more support to early career teachers and therefore hopefully retain them within the profession. It is, if you've looked at any of the materials so far, if you've looked at this in detail, it is quite different to induction at the moment, excuse me, and it will require more time for your ECTs and also your mentors, but we'll talk about that as we go through. So if I can have the next slide, please. So the design approach and content, and you've got there the link to the actual document itself. But there are 5 core areas which are all linked to the teacher standards. And like all the new frameworks, it's divided into learn that and learn how to statements. And on the next slide, we can see an example of that. If we can go on to the next slide. There we go. So high expectations. So it's linked with the teacher standards. So there are a series of statements. Learn that. Learn how to. And that is what the materials that are covered by that the lead providers have produced are all intended to cover those statements. So if we move on, we can see here. This is again a busy DFE slide, but I do think it's quite good in kind of highlighting the changes between the current arrangement and the arrangements from September. And if I just pick out a couple of things that I think are quite major changes. So in terms of the content, currently there's no defined content for what you have to cover in an induction programme for your NQTs at the moment. But from September 2021, the content should be based on the early career framework, and that has implications for, so we'll talk later about the choices you have as a school, whether to work with a lead provider or to produce your own induction programme. But if you decide to produce your own induction programme, it must be based on the early career framework, on those learn that, learn how to statements. You can't just kind of continue with what you're doing at the moment unless it is already based on those statements. I think one of the biggest changes for me is the role of the mentor under the new system. So currently, the mentor, if you look at the current guidelines, the DFE guidelines, the appropriate body guidelines, the mentor as a role is not separately defined. It refers to the induction tutor. At the moment, the mentor will be doing kind of the weekly meetings, the support, the professional development, and also probably the assessing and the writing of the end of term reports and that kind of thing. Under the new system, they do separate the mentor and the induction tutor. And if you've looked at the new guidelines, they very definitely talk about the role of the mentor, the role of the induction tutor. And the mentor is the person who will do the weekly meetings, who will deliver, if you like, the ECF content in terms of those discussions about pedagogy, about support, about professional development, but they don't have an assessment role. And it's the induction tutor who will potentially do formal lesson observations and who will write the end of term, the progress, the assessments, the formal assessments. They will only have 2 formal assessments next year, one at the end of each year, but those are supported by regular progress reviews. So if the assessments are at the end of terms 3 and 6, at the end of 1, 2, 4 and 5, hopefully I've got all the numbers in there, there are progress reviews just to check how the ECT is doing, and they are still assessed against the teacher standard. So as we said before, the ECF is not an assessment tool, and they seem to be very much separating ECF as a form of support, professional development, and induction, the formal assessed elements of induction. We're going to come to funding later on, because I suspect that's where there's probably the most kind of questions or queries. But the other thing I want to pick up from here is the role of the appropriate body. And I don't know if there are any appropriate body representatives on the call today. I know we've had some conversations with appropriate bodies in other areas across our hub region. But at the moment, as an appropriate body, your QA consists in, checking all the statutory entitlements are in place for NQTs. Under the new system, yes, you still do that, but appropriate bodies also have a responsibility to check that if schools are doing their own programme of support and their own induction programme, that it is based on the ECF. So there's an extra layer of what they're calling fidelity checking and an extra layer of quality assurance for appropriate bodies under the new system. So if we can move on. Thank you. So, and again, you may or may not be aware of this at the moment, depending on your role in school and depending how much time you've had to look into this. But schools have 3 choices from September, or 3 options of how to approach this. So you can go for what the DfE are calling the full induction programme. So that is fully funded, provider-led programme, so with materials provided by one of the lead providers. This is what we will be offering as the Teaching School Hub. Some of you, if you are involved in other kind of MATs or trusts, they might have chosen to partner with one of the lead providers, but this is through a lead provider working with a hub or another kind of large group to offer the entire programme for ECTs and mentors. The second choice you have is you could offer what they're calling the core induction programme. So that is where you as a school decide, actually, we don't want to work with the hub for whatever reason. We'd rather use the core induction programme materials by a different provider. So we're going to put our own programme together, but using those materials. And there are funding implications. You don't get quite as much funding if you choose the core induction programme. And again, we will look at funding in a few minutes. Or you can do the DIY version and do your own school-based programme that you put together completely yourself, design and deliver your own programme. But again, that has to be based on the ECF content. So you can't just kind of say, well, we've got this programme at the moment, we'll add a few bits in and that'll be okay. It has to be based on the ECF, and that's what an appropriate body will check. So I think if you are wanting to do the school-based programme, then that's just something to be aware of, that potentially that's quite a lot of work. So I think it's worth considering the full induction programme or looking at the core induction programme if you prefer materials from one of the other providers. So if we can move on, and again, this is a DfE version of the same thing, of the slide, showing the three routes or 3 choices for schools. And if we look over, so starting on the far left, so if you use a training provider, so that's through the hub, for example, with a lead provider, those are the things that you get for doing that programme. And you can see that where things are funded. So everybody will be funded for time off timetable for your early career teachers, because they get a 5% timetable reduction in the second year of induction, and that is funded regardless of what programme you choose. Time for your mentors in the second year of induction to conduct mentor meetings is funded regardless of which programme you choose. But if you choose the full induction programme, then there is additional funding to backfill mentor time for doing training, because the full induction programmes have quite a detailed or quite a full programme of training for mentors to support them, to help them develop their mentoring practices. And so you will get extra funding to cover the mentor's time to attend that training or to do the reading or whatever. So there is a level of additional funding if you choose to work with a lead provider, potentially through ourselves as the hub. And obviously you get a wider range of training, really. It's a broader programme, there is more support in there. If you choose to use the core induction programme, then you'd still get that the timetable time off timetable funded. And there are materials, the core induction materials are freely available online from 4 of the lead providers. And so you get a lot of materials, not quite as much as if you were doing a full programme, but there are a lot of materials on there you can use to produce your own, to use for your own programme. And obviously, if you choose to do something completely independently, again, you still get that time off timetable funded. You have to follow the early career framework, but then you would put together your own programme. The 6 lead providers, if we can move on to the next slide. So these are the 6 national providers, and they have, you can see details about their programmes online. Ambition Institute, Education Development Trust, Teach First and UCL Institute of Education are the 4 that were involved in the early rollout, and those are the 4 whose materials are available as the core induction programme. Hope this is still making sense. So, and we'll talk a bit later about which provider we've chosen to partner with at the moment. But those are the 6 national providers, and as I say, 4 of them have provided the core induction materials, which are available online. So, just say a couple of things about the role of the appropriate body. So, this can be a teaching school hub or a local authority. Now, as we said, we are currently the appropriate body for Slough. And I know that in the other areas, the local authority acts as the appropriate body. And we are not looking, I just want to stress that second bullet point there, we are not looking to compete with established arrangements in other local authorities. You can carry on using your local authority as an appropriate body. If there's any of our Slough schools here, we're very much hoping you'll stay with us as your appropriate body. But you know, as I say, if you're currently using your local authority, that's absolutely fine. I've mentioned the assessments, and again, just want to stress that the appropriate body and ECF providers are separate. And we've said the ECF programme of support is fully funded. Appropriate body services are not. There will still be a fee probably for your appropriate body services, and I can't speak for the local authorities how they organise their appropriate body services, but you know, those services are not funded. And because they're the two are separate, you can work with us as your appropriate body, even if you're working with a different provider for the ECF, or if you're, you know, we can do your ECF and you work with someone else as your appropriate body, so you can mix and match as a school. And I think we have another slide, which again, this is the DFE with version of that, if you like. And I think what this shows is, if you go across the top, you've got the 3 options again. And I think it's just worth highlighting again that if you choose your own induction programme, you have there's a greater involvement from the appropriate body, if you like, because they will be expected to check in a greater level of detail, you know, looking at your programme, possibly before you start, possibly partway through, so that, you know, if you're doing a programme through the lead provider, through us, the appropriate body has less to check, because they know that the programme you're following is already fully aligned with the early career framework. Funding, so I've sort of mentioned this a little bit already. So as I say, that the DFE will fund the schools for the ECT's timetable reduction in year 2 and for mentor time in year 2, with the assumption being that year 1 there is no additional funding for year 1, because they are assuming that is already in the school budget. That is the DFE line. If you want to use the core induction programme materials, those are completely free online. And if you do the full induction programme through the Teaching School Hub, that is all fully funded. There is no charge for any of that. And if you choose that option, you will get additional funding for your mentors to attend the training. And the ECF is all, you know, it's intended to be no cost to participating schools. In terms of kind of amounts, this is taken from the DFE website, so you can see kind of indicative amounts of funding that you will get per ECT and per mentor. And I think we were looking before, we're probably our schools are either in the fringe area or in England. So those are the sums that you're looking at. And the next slide, again, very busy DFE one, gives a little bit more detail about the funding and how it's calculated. And in terms of when you get it, I have had some questions from schools about when they might get the funding. And you can see there, it says a single payment will be made in the summer term of the second year of induction, based on how many ECTs you have. So the funding goes into the second year in the summer term, and they collect the data through the workforce census. And again, that just stresses sort of the basic level of funding and the additional funding if you're doing the full induction programme. In terms of our role, so Teaching School Hubs, we've had to formally partner with only one ECF provider for our region, and we will deliver the programme locally through local clusters and local facilitators. And we really want to stress that, because obviously if we think back to the map and where we are, you know, please don't think if you decide to work with us as your ECF provider, your ECTs will all have to trek over to Slough for things. That is not the case. We are looking to create local clusters with local facilitators, so you can really personalise and tailor this programme to your own local need. There's an online programme as well, so some things will be face-to-face, possibly next year, or it may still all be online next year, the training sessions, but there are also kind of online activities for ECTs and mentors. As I've said, we will also act as the appropriate body. We've decided to partner with UCL Institute of Education, and for a few reasons. You can see there, their programmes seem to offer a large degree of flexibility in delivery in terms of when things happen and how you can organise the materials and your sessions. I think one thing that particularly appealed to me was the fact that year 2 of the programme is quite different, and in year 2 there's the opportunity for ECTs to do short inquiry projects. So I felt it, you know, we felt it wasn't just more of the same in year 2. Obviously, you know, UCL Institute of Education, they've got a very good, you know, well-established reputation for educational research and delivering high-quality CPD programmes. And also, we've got a very strong sense of, you know, wanting to work in partnership with hubs and schools. So those are the reasons why we particularly decided to partner with UCL. And in terms of their programme, we've just got a couple of slides highlighting their programme, so as a sort of summary. And as I say, we will offer another session where we can go into more detail about their programme. So you can see there what the expectations are of mentors and ECTs in the first year. And I just want to pick up on the self-study, the self-study element here. So for mentors, one of the things again that we liked was mentors have to attend 3 hours online over the year, 1 hour each term, and the rest of the mentor training is self-study. So it's nominally 12 hours, 2 hours a half term, but obviously they can kind of divide that up, spread that over the half term, which made it quite flexible. And in year 2, again, so you can see there year 2, so slightly different, fortnightly meetings, slightly, you know, less structured self-study for the ECTs, but as I say, the focus is on these inquiry projects, which enables it to be really quite bespoke, we thought, for the second year. Last couple of slides on the early career framework. So in terms of what you need to do next, and again, this is DFE, so if you think you might want to work with the Teaching School Hub, with the lead provider through us, easiest ways is just to get in touch with us. If you think you might want to use the core induction programme, materials, not UCL's materials, then have a look at that. And if you feel you want to do your own thing, then obviously you need to start kind of researching that. There is going to be an online service where you need to register your schools, but that I think is going to come direct from the DFE in terms of information about how you do that. So we don't want to get too much into that. And finally, this is just information about an event that Institute of Education are holding. It is not to do with their programme at all. It is not specific to their programme, but they've produced these 3 guides to implementation, working with the early career framework. And if you're interested in that, you can sign up via the Eventbrite link. And I can either try and put that in the chat later, or it'll be on the slides. And that's next week, just for a little bit of extra information if you are interested. Okay. Thank you, John. I nearly made it. I know I'm a couple of minutes over, but I'm going to hand back to John to talk about MPQs.
Thank you very much, Janet. Just before we go on to the MPQs, just conscious that if anybody does have any questions about ECF, nothing's appeared in the chat, which I'm not quite sure what that tells me. We do have something. Thank you, Shabina. You've kicked it off. If a school was to undertake the full induction programme, how will that look for part-time NQTs?
So part-time NQTs can either do it. So say you had someone who's 0.5, technically they should do 4 years of induction, which sounds slightly daunting, I think, for everybody. So you can look at So you can look at basically reducing the induction time. So they could do it in 2 years if you felt at the end of 2 years they had, successfully met the teaching standards to the required standard, or they could do an extended period. But the guidance does mention that you can they don't have to do it particularly pro rata and extend endlessly. They can do it in 2 years still.
Janet, sorry, that was me. I'm with Shabina. It's me, Omar. Are you okay? Thank you for that.
Oh, hi, Anna. Yeah, hi.
Right. Yeah. I just want to quickly add to that. A slight caveat is. So is that discretionary to the school then at the end of the 2 years, whether that particular part-time NQT has?
Yeah, I think that would be discussed sort of in conjunction with the school and the appropriate bodies. My understanding.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen another question about NQTs who start mid-year. We're all asking that about NQTs who start mid-year at the moment, and I think the expectation is that lead providers have to have the flexibility within their systems for that is built into the system. So that's coming up in a lot of webinars that we're going to as well. But we're imagining that, yeah, they start the programme then part way through. But that should be, that's got to be accommodated.
There's a couple of other general questions, and one from David about the special school. David, it's okay with you? I think we might pick that up with you separately, and perhaps have a separate conversation about that, if that's all right. If your contact details will have come through the registration process.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, pick that up with you.
Lovely.
Both years of induction have to be at the same school?
No, they don't. They can move. I can see we haven't got costs yet for our appropriate body charges. I can see the question about the finances, the £900 in the finances. So I think that my understanding of the finances is what's on the DFE website is for the timetable release for year 2. I don't think they've necessarily specified an amount for the 36 hours of mentor training time release at the moment, I think. Is that your understanding, John? I think that's what we've been told from webinars. And again, we've been asking that question because that's what schools will want to know. But I imagine it, I don't know whether it will be quite similar or not. I mean, if that's saying that's 20 hours, of mentor meeting time in year 2, and then you're saying 36 hours of training. So I don't know, but you only get the additional payment if you do the full induction programme.
Yeah, so can I just jump in there, please, Jan? Yeah, that we've got the 1,200 and the £900. What I'm still uncertain about is whether that £900 is just for the schools that are on option 1, or is that open to everybody? And then the additional mentor training is the bit that's only open to option 1 people.
So when you're saying option 1, is that the full induction program you're meaning? Yeah. So the £900 is for all schools, and then the additional payment is the option 1, I think. John, is that right? Is that what you're thinking?
So the £900 is covering mentoring time. I think that's the best way to think about it. That's the
so
release
everyone gets that.
of mentors to do the mentoring work in school. If you work through a delivery partner on the full induction program, there is an additional funding to cover mentor training. So it's time release for mentor training as distinct from a mentoring. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
We are still waiting sort of final details of this, and I think we're in a slightly frustrating position very often of not being able to answer fully the questions that many schools are wanting to ask. Yeah, but we're asking the same questions ourselves.
I've read somewhere it's another £900. So if you went through a fully funded programme, you get £1,200, £900 and £900 for mentor training. And we're talking
another amount for the 900 for the mentor training.
Yeah,
yes, it does vary slightly from provider to provider.
Ah, right. Thank you.
Couple of questions about the ECF programme, and can you sign up directly with UCL? The answer is no, isn't it? You have to work through a delivery partner. So UCL are working with a number of delivery partners, and primarily those delivery partners are teacher school hubs or multi-academy trusts, or some other established collaborations within particular areas. But you can't go directly to UCL and sign up directly with them. Do you want to take the other one, Janet, about the induction program only being available through TSH? Anne-Marie's question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the same thing. So the full induction program is only available through a teaching school hub, through a MAT, through an organisation that has partnered with one of the lead providers. So that is going to be largely teaching school hubs. But I suppose potentially if your school, I mean, I don't know where your school is, if you were kind of on the edge of Slough and say that the hub across was working with a different lead provider and you wanted to join in with them, then that's an option. I know, you know, if you're part of a MAT and you're working, your MAT is working with a different lead provider, you could work with them. But it's the full induction program has to be through something like a teaching school hub, a MAT, a local authority, a larger organisation, if that makes sense.
And you're perfectly free to sign up with a different hub, you know, in another area. But what you would lose then is the localised aspect of the provision. There is no cost to sign up to the TSH. No, it's not. We're not charging anything. We will charge for appropriate body services, but you do not have to be. You do not have to pay anything to the hub directly. If your existing local cluster does not align with TSH Berkshire, would you act directly with our school? Christopher, could you just explain that question a little bit more? Chris?
Yeah, so sorry, just basically, if obviously there are pre-existing teaching school hubs, as you alluded to, and we have local clusters as well that we operate with. But if our cluster decides to go for, if you like, the core or even their own version, but we decide that we want to go for your, if you like, version of the full quota, would we then have to operate directly with you? Would we have to switch to a different sort of local cluster that you're looking to operate with? How would that work?
I think you could operate with us. I think if if you want to do the full induction program through us, then you get in touch with us, and I'm sure we'll be arranging then, looking at where we can cluster schools together and create groups for the ECT and the mentor training. So that would be fine.
Okay, that's exactly answered. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question
and
about
Anne-Marie.
sorry, Joan.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, yeah, Marie. So yeah, so Wokingham can stay as your appropriate body, and you can sign up with us as the hub to do the ECF programme. That's absolutely fine.
I think it's worth saying we've been talking to Wokingham and Reading,
Wokingham and Reading, and
Windsor and Maidenhead, and they're all continuing as appropriate bodies, and they want to sort of liaise with us about, so they know what we're doing about the ECF, and then they come in as the appropriate body. We're the appropriate body for Slough, but that's only one of the 6 authorities. We have no interest in treading on toes where existing arrangements work well. But on the other hand, if anybody would like to use us as an appropriate body, if they're outside Slough, they're very welcome to. Shall I move on, Janet, to the MPQ? You'll be relieved to know that the remaining strands are much, much shorter. So let's just quickly say something about NPQs. So you're all familiar with the National Professional Qualification Suite as it has existed, and this fits towards the right-hand end of the department's golden thread spectrum. So the NPQs are aimed at experienced teachers and middle leaders, and then senior leaders, heads and executive leadership. The right-hand half of that we're familiar with. The biggest change is in the middle leadership area, where instead of the existing 1 qualification for middle leadership, there are now 3 specialist qualifications. Those are in very small type on here, so I'm going to pass quickly over the DFE slide here, which you can always access in your own time, and just show you the summary. So the new suite of professional qualifications, if I start at the bottom, because actually those are the most familiar, the NPQSL remains, NPQH remains, NPQEL remains, at least in title. There are quite significant changes to the structure of the qualifications themselves and the content of those. So they have been overhauled, and the content has been revised, but the qualification names still exist. The big changes with the so-called specialist NPQs, and there are 3 on offer. There's the National Professional Qualification for Leading Teaching. And I guess if you think about this from a secondary perspective, this is the sort of qualification that's appropriate for your subject leaders, your heads of departments. In a primary school context, these might be phase people who are leading key stages, or those perhaps with a significant subject responsibility across the school. The second specialist NPQ is Leading Behaviour and Culture, more suited to those who hold pastoral leadership responsibilities. Again, in a secondary context, perhaps your heads of year would be interested in travelling that route, and those with significant pastoral responsibilities in primary schools. And then the third one, which is the biggest departure from what we've got currently, is the NPQ for Leading Teacher Development. And the sort of logic behind this is that there's a big emphasis in this whole golden thread framework on teacher development. So it relies much more on facilitators coming forward, the mentors in schools and so on. And therefore it makes sense to have a qualification which is aimed at developing that particular strand of expertise. So this is about CPD, leading teacher reduction in schools. So the national qualification for leading teacher development. What is our role? Well, we'll be working with one of the 9 national providers to deliver the NPQ suite. We're still in discussion with those different providers. The information about each one was only publicised last week, end of last week, and early this week, and so we're still in the process of deciding which of those to go with. Of those 9 providers, 6 of them are the same providers as are running the ECF. So there is a sort of logic that says you might go with the same provider as with your ECF, but that is not the conclusion we've come to as yet. The core content is the same for all the providers, but the delivery modes and the approaches do vary, as they do a little bit with ECF. So whichever provider we land with, we will be organising and delivering the NPQs on a local and regional cluster basis, again using local facilitators, very much as it probably runs at the moment. And what you can expect is as you go further up the qualification chain, the sort of geographical area over which that cluster operates will get bigger and bigger. So you'd probably expect an NPQH cohort to run across at least half of the county or possibly the whole county, whereas the specialist qualifications will be run on a much smaller scale based in the local areas. Janet, back to you for initial teacher training, I think.
Yeah, and this will be very quick because at the moment this is the one that we're getting kind of the least information about, if you like, in terms of the Teaching School Hub remit. So we do, it is part of the remit to deliver ITT, but obviously at the moment there's the whole market review going on and so on. So you know, at the moment the message is really that schools and local partnerships can continue to offer ITT as currently. I know there were several of you that offer school direct programs, recruiting for next year, and that's fine. And so we will support, signpost, link to existing providers, help and support in any way we can at the moment. One thing we have done is we've joined NASBIT through our Teaching School Hub Berkshire as Teaching School Hub Berkshire. So if you're not a member and you would like to access that membership through us, then I think you should be able to just register, and if you put as your organisation TSH Berkshire, my understanding is that we can have as many kind of members as we like. So if you're involved in ITT, that's something that might be of interest to you. The last strand of the remit is other CPD, and as John said at the start, the idea of this, it should be responsive to local need, and where possible we have a sort of duty, if you like, a responsibility to signpost DFE funded programmes. So I know there were some maths hubs out there. I know there's an English hub. I know we've got behaviour hub. So the sort of starting point is DFE funded programmes, and any additional CPD. So if we identify, and again, it's very much based on local need. If there's an identified local need for some CPD that we then put in our own CPD, it should be underpinned by the standard for teachers' professional development, which I think we have on the next slide. So any other CPD has to meet these criteria and have a focus on improving outcomes and so on. So that's the kind of benchmark for other CPD, if you like. So I think then I'm passing back to John for the last little bit.
Thanks, Janet. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour of the remit for each of those. The DFE programme for the teaching school hubs themselves is being rolled out, over a period of time, and we're passing on the information to you pretty much as we receive it. So we are at the moment going through a whole series of webinars and discussion forums with the DFE and the Teaching School Council to clarify all the aspects of the remit. And then we are passing those out as soon as we can. The timescale isn't necessarily what we would have wished for, and I know that doesn't always sit comfortably with some schools' forward planning, but it is what it is, and we will get the information out to you just as quickly as we can. The priorities that we've been given for the Teachers School within that remit are to focus on getting the ECF organised first, then the NPQs, and then the other sections of the remit to kind of follow on from that. And as Janet said, there's a big review of ITT, the market review going on at the moment anyway, which may influence the future direction of that. So how is the TSH Berkshire going to operate? Well, we get an amount of grant funding per year. Those of you who are pre-existing teaching school alliances will know that there's a small grant that we get every year for infrastructure. We've got something sort of similar, but on a little bit larger scale. It's enough to fund a small core team, which will essentially consist of Janet as the Teaching School Hub Director, with some administrative and finance support, and that will be based over at Langley in our school. But the funding also enables us to fund a small number And I do need to manage expectations here, but a small number of additional funded posts distributed across Berkshire, including things like ECF and NPQ leadership and facilitation. Now, what does that look like? It means that if you've got somebody in your local area who you think is going to be a really good facilitator for the ECF or the NPQ, we can fund a responsibility allowance or some release time for that person. That's the sort of thing that we're talking about, depending on the levels of responsibility that you might be able to give to that person. So that's particularly important given the way we want to operate as a teacher school hub with establishing all these local clusters. We're very conscious they will need to be led. Leading takes time. Time requires some funding. So an element of our core grant funding will be used for that, and also so we get funding through the ECF provider that we can hopefully use to fund some of that facilitation work as well. It is possible, Janet mentioned the other CPD strands, it's possible that we could, as we get further down the line with this, fund and support some elements of other CPD, if that's of wider interest across areas of the county. So if you've got some really good CPD that's going on in the local area, we may be able to help and support the facilitation of that in an ongoing basis. In terms of the sort of communication structure, there is a website with the tshberkshire.org website address. That's under construction at the moment. There is an interim site which should be operating from early May, and the main site should be completed in July, and that will be the place to go to for the information. And we will try and very proactively use the Twitter feed TSH Berkshire, which will go live as basically as soon as we've got something to tweet out, and which will be details around the website, and also perhaps sending out the details of these meetings, and then further information which is beginning to come through now about things like the NPQs and so on. So that's the way it's going to work. We're just about on time. I don't know if anybody had any last questions that they wanted to raise. Otherwise, we've just got a couple of very, very brief slides to share at the end about some next steps.
Hi, John. Sorry, very quick. Just thank you for that. It's brilliant. I just want to ask whether these slides will be sent to us.
Yes, we've got a repeat session on Monday, so we're going to send the email out again. But as I said at the beginning, we're working off a DFE address list, distribution list at the moment. Because Berkshire has the 6 authority areas, it's really difficult to actually get all the contact details.
Sure.
So we're working off the DFE's list, which primarily uses admin email addresses for schools. So we're never quite sure whether that goes to the right people. So I'm going to fire it all out again. And perhaps those of you who are on the call, if you think it's worth colleagues attending the other session on Monday, if you'd like to forward the email on or use any local networks that you have, then we'd be very grateful for that. Thank you very much. Sorry, cleaners coming in. Sorry, that's put me off for a moment. The other part of your question.
Yeah, that's fine. That's great.
So is that okay? Yeah. So we will. Yeah. So we have recorded this. We will actually put this out as a link next week, together with the recording of the other session as well, and that will end up as a video on a YouTube channel, and we'll send you out a link to that, and there'll also be a link to the slides as well. Okay. So you'll get all the information. So the last couple of things that I was going to say very quickly. We want to know what you would like from us, what you might want from the Teaching School Hub, and what are your local needs? What support might you be seeking from Berkshire? We know Slough very well. We know other areas with varying degrees of knowledge, depending on our connections within them. And I know Janet knows, a number of you on this call, but some of you we've not had contact with at all, obviously. We're interested to hear from you about what you might want. When the hub is fully established, we will be undertaking a more formal needs analysis to help inform future CPD developments. But in the meantime, if you have anything that you think might be appropriate for us to be considering now for implementation in September, please add any quick comments to the chat or email Janet using the email address which is on the screen there. And then lastly, as I said, thank you for your time. The repeat presentation will be on Monday during the school day. So we try to do one in the school day and one after to try and hit different sort of priorities. The Zoom details for that were previously circulated, and I will send those out again tomorrow. And the recordings, look out for those, some information coming through from those, so probably Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. And our contact details again on the screen there. Be very, very keen to hear from any of you. And if you have any further questions or want any further clarification about anything that's been said this afternoon, please don't hesitate to be in touch. But we look forward to working with you over the next 3 years as the designated teaching school hub for Berkshire. Janet, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I just want to echo again, just thank you everyone for your time this afternoon. As I say, if there's anything else, then please email any questions, queries, or anyone else you think we need to know about in your school, in your region, because it's very much at the moment about just trying to get to know more schools and more people outside Slough. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. And what we'll do is we'll turn our cameras off and so on, but we'll just leave the chat open for a few moments in case anybody just wanted to pop anything in there as an idea or something for us to take away and think about. But thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you.